money on the line. How will lawmakers spend your tax dollars? We break down the budget proposals.
Every water solution must be on the table if we're going to meet the needs of the future.
Water worries. How will Texas handle future growth and drought? We talk with Texas Agriculture Commissioner Todd Staples. And we tackle all of the issues with our roundtable, Peggy Fekak from the San Antonio Express News, Ross Ramsey from the Texas Tribune, and Karen Brooks from the Dallas Morning News.
Now, in-depth coverage of the Texas legislative session. In session, in depth.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm KXAN political reporter Josh Hinkle. The Texas legislature is now fully underway with rules set for both chambers. Now the focus moves to the big topic that affects every one of us in different ways, the budget. The impact will range from how many parks will remain open to whether schools are fully funded. The two men leading the budget writing process released their proposals. Both Representative Jim Pitts and Senator Tommy Williams are pushing for leaner budgets despite the state's rosier fiscal outlook. On the House side, Pitts proposed a $188 billion budget, which is a 1.2% decrease from the current budget. The Senate budget is $1 billion leaner. Neither budget restores the $5 billion in education cuts. Both also freeze funding for the embattled state agency set up to fight cancer. Democrats and education groups have criticized both proposed budgets. Lawmakers are also looking to fund enrollment growth for Medicaid, but the two proposals differ on a time frame. Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst says his chamber's plan would improve health care for the poor and disabled while fighting fraud.
So we can provide health care more efficiently, and we can fight and root out fraud and abuse in Medicaid.
Dewhurst says the state lost $6 billion in Medicaid fraud between 2004 and 2011. Texas infrastructure will require a lot of money in the coming years. Earlier this month, TxDOT said it needed $1 billion to fully fund road construction and maintenance. And that's not the only problem needing fixing here. The Texas chapter of the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the state's infrastructure a C this year. The report says Texas gets a D when it comes to flood control. In aviation, the state scored a C+. Texas wastewater infrastructure rates a C-, and in energy, a B+. The report says there was very little improvement since 2008, the last time the group released a scorecard for the state. One big challenge many small towns are facing, the lack of water. Simply put, some small communities are drying up. Many top lawmakers are pushing for a water infrastructure bank that lets communities borrow money for water projects, billions possibly coming from the state's rainy day fund. I visited New Braunfels to check out the type of project you could see in your town. Two rivers run through New Braunfels and two aquifers run under it.
We are at the New Braunfels Utilities water treatment plant. 10 steps.
Paula DeFonso with the local utility took us on a tour of the place pumping 8 million gallons a day.
The water is being piped in from the Guadalupe River.
During the drought, water restrictions were in place, reminding her of the reports from the late 80s when the Edwards Aquifer dropped dangerously low.
We needed to be able to diversify our water supply.
They needed this second option. Once constructed, it brought relief and more than half of the town's current water supply.
We needed to be able to make sure that we could supply our customers.
In the 2 decades since this water plant went in, the number of customers has gone up. New Braunfels' population has more than doubled in that time. Back then, it cost $10 million to put this thing in. Today, it would cost $40 million. State lawmakers know many places can't afford to pay for new projects. Republican Doug Miller represents the New Braunfels area, which will likely need a second plant in 3 to 5 years.
Smaller communities, other communities that don't have the financial well-being or aren't in a growth area like New Braunfels is, that will need support from the state.
But state money might be tough, depending on how the budget goes.
A lot of challenges going forward, and none of them are inexpensive.
What makes the most financial sense to DeFonso, places nearby working with New Braunfels for the money, a regional effort to stay afloat.
We have to solve this issue.
Looking in depth at the state's water crisis, the Texas Water Development Board released new projections for the next 50 years. The state will need to spend $53 billion on water projects to keep up. If it doesn't, a record drought could cost Texas $116 billion a year, plus millions of jobs. But some groups like Environment Texas have concerns. Its leader says damming rivers and draining aquifers can be very harmful to the environment, and we need to exhaust all conservation and efficiency before we spend money on those projects.
The more water conservation that we have, the more it can delay some of those other projects, and it adds value to the consumer.
Coming up, the state's agriculture commissioner weighs in on our water worries. Todd Staples joins us in the studio when In Session, In Depth returns.